What's going on, church? I am so excited to be here. I hope you are excited to be. Oh my gosh, it's you. I'm so glad you're here in particular. Everyone's wondering who that is. It's one of my old youth who's now a grown-up and is getting married soon, and I get to do her wedding, and I'm so happy about it. Anyways, that doesn't matter for the rest of you. Good morning, Aviator Church. If you're new here, my name's Dave. I'm the lead pastor here, and I am so excited that you are here today. And can I tell you, I want to start out by telling you that sometimes in life, you have unexpected blessings that you didn't even know you had them, right? Like you just walk around this life not knowing that you get to experience or are the benefactor of some incredible thing that maybe you don't even realize. And I was actually told last week, I met with a bunch of families, new families, at our new attender event. We had like 1 million people there. It's really awesome. But I was talking to people there, and did you know that I was made aware that you people and you people are so lucky. Do you know why? Because these poor people over here, last week, I had a map on the screen, right? And I was moving around a little red laser pointer, and unbeknownst to me, that because of me standing here, there is a swath of people on this side of the room that can never see what's going on this screen. Can you believe that? And yet they come to church anyways. Can you guys give them a round of applause? It's a hard life they live over here on my left side of the room that you guys just haven't had to experience. So anyways, today I'm just going to stand like this so you all get to know what it's like. Today we're continuing our series on Deuteronomy. We started this recently here, actually last week officially, 2 weeks ago kind of unofficially. And we're going to continue working through our series on Deuteronomy. And normally when I'm working on a message, my objective is simple. I want you to learn more about who God is so that you can grow to love him more. That is typically my objective when I get up here and preach, but not today. Today I have a different objective. You want to know what my objective is? You ready for this? My objective today is to make every single one of you very angry. Right? I've decided that if I just come in and that's my objective, then I don't have to care if you're angry or not, right? Because I've decided that that's what I'm here to do. So today, I'm just going to try to make you mad. And I bet you, some of you are like, oh, Dave, you won't make me mad. It's church and we love Jesus and everything is good and it's sunny outside and the Mavericks are in the Western Conference Finals. What more could you ask for? Nobody else cares about basketball, but I'm hype about that last one, right? How could you do anything that would make us upset? What topic could we possibly talk about, Dave, that would cause me to be offended? What topic could be so divisive and so controversial that you could almost guarantee that at some point during today's message, every single person in the room will find some reason to be offended? What could you possibly talk about, Dave? Here we go. Let's learn about political formation. Who's hype right now? I heard Broncos. I bet you'd rather hear about Broncos, wouldn't you? Especially now that we got a quarterback who's going to absolutely destroy the Chiefs this year. Anyways, today we're going to talk about political formation. Here's the thing. I really thought about zipping through the next several verses that we're going to talk about today. I thought about flying through them and not even really focusing on them and really getting into the meat of the rest of chapter 1 of the book of Deuteronomy, which talks about the spies going in and scouting out the land and then coming back and saying we can't take it and God's punishment. And we're going to get into all of that. But there's these verses, and the more I read them this week, the more I got hung up on them, the more I realized, we have to dive into this because we have to understand the mindset of the people. And as we're understanding the mindset of the people, it will help us to better understand the book. And so today, we're going to talk about political formation, specifically, how is a nation formed? Right? Because that's really what we're looking at in the story of Deuteronomy, right? We have these people, and they're these people without a land. They are yet to be technically a nation, and yet they are a people looking to form a nation. And so the question is, how do they get from point A to point B? How do they go from being just a group of people to being an actual nation? And I'll say this, how a country becomes a nation matters. Can I prove it to you and offend you all on the same shot? Let's talk about America, shall we? how America was formed matters, right? I'm going to make two. Now, hold on. Let me just start out and say there's a couple of ground rules today. Ordinarily, I want you to respond to me, right? If I say something and the Spirit is really pouring through me, I like when you say amen. You never do it, but I like when you do, right? Sometimes I'm asking for questions where I want you to engage with me and answer questions out loud, right? And I really appreciate when you do that. Sometimes I'll say things that are prompts, like the hero of the book of Acts is the... right? And you guys know what to say because we've done that a bunch of times. This is one of those times where preemptively I am asking you all to just be nice and quiet. Okay? If you jump in with your thoughts and your woo or whatever, here's what's going to happen. Number one, you're going to miss the point because I'm coming for everyone. Okay? And number two is you're just going to offend somebody who sits on the other side of the aisle. And I'm not talking about other sections. You understand what I mean? So don't talk, don't hoot and holler. I don't want any amens, and I don't want any woos. You guys understand me? What did I just say? Okay? Just be quiet. Let me get to my point. It's going to be amazing. Just don't. This ain't social media. We don't want your opinion. Okay. I'm going to make two statements about America. I would like you to think quietly. I would like you to think quietly to yourself which one of these two statements is true. Statement number one. The founding fathers of this nation were incredible men who fought for an incredible ideal and collectively created the highest form of government that the world has ever known. Shh. Statement number two. The founding fathers of this nation were racist, and they created a system in which a group of minority lost rights to the expense of the majority gaining rights. Shh. Which one? Don't answer. This is rhetorical. Which one of those statements is true? Because I'll tell you this, seems to be a pretty intense debate these days about which one of those statements is true, because political formation matters. How a nation is formed matters. The things that we identify as our heritage as a nation matter. And this is what we're seeing right now. We're seeing this nation of Israel being formed before our very eyes. And I promise you, the things that are done during this season will matter for thousands of years to come. Have you guys ever heard how there's conflict and strife in the Middle East? You guys heard anything about that? No, not most. You told me not to talk, Dave. I'm not doing it, right? Do you know that a lot of that conflict and strife has to do specifically with stuff we're going to study here in the book of Deuteronomy? Now, let's for a second, I'm going to answer the question of which one of those statements is true, and you're not going to like the answer. You're not going to like it. And let's just again preemptively state, for the record, I don't care, because I've already said that I'm going to try to offend every last one of you today. You ready? The correct answer is both of those statements are true. Both of those statements are true. They were great men, the founding fathers, who fought for solid ideals and built a country on sound principles, and they owned slaves and didn't extend those rights to everyone. My favorite speech in all of American history, you should absolutely, I've actually referenced this speech before, but I'm going to do it again here so you can understand from somebody who maybe has a little bit more skin in this game than we do. It was given by Frederick Douglass. The name of the speech is What to the Slave is the 4th of July. It was given in 1852. It was given to a crowd in New York, and I'm just going to read you one quote from that speech before we get into it too far. It says this: "The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history, the very ring bolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny. Pride and patriotism, not less than gratitude, prompt you to celebrate it and hold it in perpetual remembrance. I have said that the Declaration of Independence is the ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny. So indeed I regard it. The principles contained in that instrument, in the Declaration of Independence, are saving principles. Stand by those principles. Be true to them on all occasions, in all places, against all foes, and at whatever cost." Love this speech because ultimately what Frederick Douglass is saying, a man who had escaped slavery himself, a man who had incredible wisdom and intellect and had the ability to speak so clearly and profoundly. What he said is this: your founding fathers, he said this specifically in the speech, they were great men with great principles and great ideals. The Declaration of Independence was a great document. The Declaration of Independence and the founding fathers, they wrote a check that the nation has yet to cash. Because the reality is, while it was great ideas and great principles, they were not extended correctly, right? They were not offered to all people. And so what I need you to understand as we look at this development of Israel's nation, right? Think about our own nation. Think about our own country. Think about the conversations that are happening today about our country, and recognize that this is a complex situation. This is a complex thing, and you were dealing with shared history. And what parts of history do we like to talk about? And what parts do we not like to talk about it? And what role does God play? And what role does humanity play? And this is what we're going to watch unfold. And so before the Jewish people ever make it up to the promised land, before any of this happens, we're going to see what took place there at Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai, as we talked about last week. And we're going to see the formation the beginning of the formation of the nation of Israel, which I will say so that you understand. And these are, by the way, this is my list. I didn't get this list from anywhere. You need to understand that in order to have a nation, you must have at least these 4 things and also several more things. Number 1, people with common bonds. We're studying the people, right? We know the people. When we're looking at the book of Deuteronomy, we're looking at what will become the Jewish nation. We're talking about the Israelites, right? The people of Israel, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So we have people with common bonds, common ancestry, common belief structures, right? The next thing you need is land with recognized borders. It's hard to be a nation if you don't have a place where your nation exists, right? Land with recognized borders. If you look at a map of America, you can see where our borders, it's actually real easy because we got water on 2 sides of it, right? You can see where the borders are. That gives us our form as a nation. Number 3 is agreed upon laws. In the book of Deuteronomy, we're going to be looking at God giving the people the law, right? We talked about this already, that Moses went up to Mount Sinai. He received the law. He came down to give it to the people. God gives the law to the people in Israel, and then enforcement of those laws. Now, I will say this real quick. When it comes to laws, I got asked this question after the sermon last week. This is a side note. We'll come back to this later. Basically, within the Israelite nation, there are 3 sets of laws that you're going to see pop up. Number 1 is civil laws. Everyone say civil. Good, you can talk again, by the way. Unless it's about politics, in which case, keep it to yourself, all right? Civil laws were laws about how Israel, the country, was supposed to operate, right? And so those laws existed so long as Israel was a country, right? And then upon being overrun, those laws ceased to exist. Next one is ceremonial laws. Everyone say ceremonial. Ceremonial laws are about how you become clean, meaning, all those animal sacrifice laws and things like that. When the people messed up, they had to do these things in order to be made clean again before God or to be made righteous. Those laws go away with the cross of Jesus Christ, which we'll get into another time. Number 3, the third type of laws, are moral laws. Everyone say moral. Moral laws are the laws that reflect God's character. When you think of the 10 Commandments, you're thinking of things that are moral laws. Don't kill people is a moral law. If you've been here long enough, you were here when we went through the Sermon on the Mount, and we talked about the fact that Jesus himself took the moral laws as given in the Old Testament, as given here in Deuteronomy and in Exodus, right? He took the moral laws and he said, what? I'm not here to blow those up. Actually, those are strengthened. We talked about the fact that in that series on the Sermon on the Mount, the formula was, you have heard that it was said, blah, 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 but I say, blah, 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 blah. You have heard that it was said, thou shalt not commit murder, but I say, if you have anger in your heart toward your brother, then you are just as guilty as the murderer, right? The moral laws reflect God's character and therefore carry over even to us today. Does that make sense to everyone? All right, so we're going to watch as a people with common bonds begin to take the land with agreed upon laws as given by God. And we're going to see kind of that process right before they start going up into the promised land. Here we go. So this is Moses talking, picking up where we left last week. Deuteronomy Chapter 1, verse 6, it says, the Lord our God said to us in Horeb, or at Mount Sinai, you have stayed long enough at this mountain. Turn and take your journey and go to the hill country of the Amorites and to all of their neighbors in the Arabah, in the hill country and in the lowland and in the Negeb, or you may see that also at times as Negev with a V at the end of it. and by the sea coast, the land of the Canaanites and Lebanon, as far as the great river, the Euphrates. And so what he's saying is this: after Israel left Egypt, and remember they ran, I feel like we have to do this now at this point. After Moses went to Pharaoh and said what? Pharaoh, Pharaoh, do it with me or we'll start the sermon over. Pharaoh, Pharaoh, oh baby, let my people go. Huh? Yeah, right? That's biblical, guys. Get with it, okay? So after he goes and he does the whole Pharaoh, let my people go. And the people leave, and then Pharaoh changes his mind. This is after all the plagues and all that jazz. And they cross the Red Sea, and they cross on dry land. And then the Egyptians come in, and then the water comes in and wipes them out. They go down to Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb, and they stay there for about a year. And during that time, God gives his law to the people. God begins to establish what really is happening is they're starting to form the nation before they take the land. So that when they get to the promised land, they will be a people with common bonds. They will have agreed upon laws, and they will have a way in which they will enforce those laws. The laws and the enforcement is what we're going to deal with some today. And so he's saying, it's time, guys. You need to get ready and you need to go. But before that, Moses says the best thing that Moses could say. Anybody who's ever been a parent or a leader of anything will understand Moses' sentiment here. Verse 9, at that time I said to you, I am not able to bear you by myself. A couple of the translations I looked at said, you have become a burden to me, right? No longer can I bear you by myself. The Lord your God has multiplied you, and behold, you are today as numerous as the stars of heaven. Now this is important. If you were here last week, we talked about understanding Deuteronomy means in part, you need to understand the biblical covenants, right? And so we talked about the covenant of Abraham, and the promise to Abraham was what? That you will have descendants that will number as many as the stars, right? And so here, what Moses is actually saying is, remember that last covenant that was given to us? God has already fulfilled that covenant. Look at you. There are as many of you as there are the stars in the sky, right? Behold, you have multiplied. There are so many of you that you have become a giant burden to me. And in case he didn't make that clear enough, he goes on. May the Lord, the God of your fathers, make you 1,000 times as many as you are and bless you. And as he has promised you, how can I bear, excuse me, how can I bear by myself the weight and burden of you and your strife? That is a statement that I have said to my children directly. How can I bear the burden of you and your strife? Oh, so much strife exists in my house. So here's the thing. Moses is recapping to the people. So remember, this is 120-year-old Moses talking to a bunch of people who are 39 and under, and he's saying, hey, let me tell you the story of what happened. So he's telling them about what happened before with their ancestors when they were given an opportunity to go to the promised land. He says, when they were getting ready to go up, before we did, I just realized that it was too much for me to bear with all of you people, and so I needed to come up with a better plan to deal with you. One might say I needed to come up with a political structure with which we could operate as a nation. And I will say this, I will note that Moses here in telling the story is leaving out one fairly significant detail because, again, this is something that already happened in the book of Exodus, and I'm going to read it to you. In Exodus chapter 18, starting in verse, let's do 13. The next day, Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning until evening. When Moses' father-in-law, how many of you love? I mean straight up love when your in-laws give you advice about how to do the things that you're doing, right? Listen, I can't be the only family like this. I know that I love it when my wife's parents tell me how to do things. Love it, right? Love it. I know that my wife thoroughly enjoys it when my parents lovingly make suggestions to her about, like, I don't know, how to discipline the children. I feel nervous laughter in the room. Is that weird? Here's the important detail that Moses left out. I just think it's funny. When Moses' father-in-law, remember, he's sitting there judging people from morning to night all day long. He just sit there and judge, disputes between people. When his father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, I love this. What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone and all the people stand around you from morning till evening? And Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make them known the statutes of God and all of his laws. Moses' father-in-law said to him, what you are doing is not good. What you're doing is not good. Thanks, Jethro, his name. Thanks, Jethro. Thanks, father-in-law. I'm sure that you're under the impression that, me marrying your daughter gives you the right to tell me how to, lead an entire nation of people and all. Thank you so much for that input. You know what's actually cool about this is Moses heard that and he was like, yeah, you're right. You right? This is actually real bad. I'm exhausted all the time. I'm starting to hate everyone. And so finally, his father-in-law comes in as the one person who says, there's a better way. Jethro goes on to explain to him, here's what you should do. You should get a bunch of leaders, and you should have them lead different sizes of people. And this would be both politically and militarily, right? These are where these leaders are falling in. So there should be commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds and 50s and 10s. And you should establish this entire system. Let's call it, a government. Right? You should establish people so that they can do the job, so that essentially those people can do the work of deciding these cases, and then not every single thing has to come to you all of the time. And Moses heard that and was like, well, by golly, I hate to admit it, father-in-law, but you're spot on correct. And so he did it. Now, I will find that it's interesting that as he then relays the story to the people all this time later, whose name just happens to be omitted. Wives, real quick. Have you ever done something in your marriage, right, where something worked out or whatever, and then your husband tells the story of how this thing happened and they just happen to forget to mention that you were the one who did it? Has that ever happened to you? Is it not the most obnoxious thing that husbands do to wives, right? I will say this, my kids are doing great in school, and it's got to be because I'm just fantastic at teaching, right? If you believe that, holy cow, man. My wife is laughing. She's the only one in the room laughing right now. Legitimately, he hears from Jethro. Jethro says, hey, you should probably do this thing. And then Moses, we're going to see, does exactly this thing. But when he tells the people, he conveniently leaves out that it was his father-in-law's idea. So he said, how can I bear by myself the weight and the burden of all of your strife? And then he says to the people, choose for your tribes, wise, understanding, and experienced men, and I will appoint them as your heads. And you answered me, quote, this is again their ancestors, the thing that you have spoken is good for us to do. Again, just once I would love to hear my children respond to me like that. When I have a great idea and he says, Father, the thing that you have spoken seems good for me to do. And then they just obey. What a day that would be, right? Verse 15, so I took the heads of your tribes, wise and experienced men, and I set them as heads over you, commanders of thousands, and commanders of hundreds, and commanders of 50s, and commanders of 10s, and officers throughout your tribes. Let's take a second and look at God's qualification or godly qualifications for leaders within the government. By the way, a lot of times people will say, Dave, who are you voting for? And here's what I'll say. It's none of your dang business, right? But I can tell you the criteria by which I vote for people, if that helps. And it's actually found right here in the book of Deuteronomy. Godly qualifications for leaders are wisdom, understanding, and experience. Choose from your tribes, people who are wise, says men in this, but we're not applying that to our American form of governance, right? There's one wife laughing and a nervous husband, all right? Wisdom, understanding, and experience. He says you should elevate, the things you should elevate, you should look for in leaders are wisdom, understanding, and experience. I don't think that all of our leaders, I don't think that all of our leaders meet the criteria of, godly leadership within the government. Can I be real honest with you? I think a lot of them actually specifically don't meet those criteria. Do you know that? I think a lot of them don't meet those criteria, and yet I also recognize that the government has been given as an authority in my life. And so there are times where I have to wrestle with this thing, where I have to accept that people who I don't believe are wise, understanding, or experienced are going to make decisions that impact my life. Can I tell you something? That doesn't make me a victim of anything. That was a good one. It doesn't make me a victim of anything. Are you guys mad yet? It's so quiet. Do you hear how quiet it is right now? It doesn't make you a victim just because you may disagree with the people who are in charge of you. But when it comes to voting, here's just a thought. If you don't like the people who exist currently in charge of the government, be it state or local or federal, maybe when you go to the voting booth, you should take some of these characteristics in there with you and determine who actually meets some of these things. Who actually is experienced and wise, right? Not just who has the letter next to their name that exists next to my name. Wow. I've never, straight up, never, I joke about it being quiet in here. It is so quiet right now. I love you guys. You fakers. I love you. I told you, that's true. I did tell you not to talk, but man, I didn't tell you to be deathly quiet. Holy night. So anyways, we're going to see God's qualification for leaders. Now, the next thing that we're going to see is actually a move from political leaders into judges. Here we go. Verse 16, and I charged your judges at that time, hear cases between your brothers and judge righteously between a man and his brother and the alien who is with him. I'm actually going to jump back over because I think this is another interesting thing. Where's it at? Sorry. Verse 19, this is still Jethro talking. Now obey my voice, I will give you advice, and God will be with you. You shall represent the people. Oh, excuse me, this is, sorry, I jumped in too early. I should have marked it better. Moses' father-in-law said to him, what you're doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. Now obey my voice, and I will give you advice, and God will be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God. And you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws and make known to them the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God and who are trustworthy and who hate a bribe. You guys hear that one? People who hate a bribe. I'm just going to say that not all of our leaders, men who hate a bribe. And place such men as over the people of as chiefs of thousands, hundreds, fifties, tens. Let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but every small matter they shall decide for themselves, so it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you, and you will be able to endure, and all this people also will go to their place in peace. And so he says not only about, setting up rulers and whatever, but find people who will judge fairly and who don't take a bribe and all this. So here he says, so I also at this time I found judges to judge righteously. So he said, let the small things be handled by other people. Listen, Moses, you don't have to handle every single thing that comes up for an entire nation of people. Nothing will ever get done, right? Have you ever been in court for anything? I lived in court for about 5 years because I was a pretrial release case manager, so I had kids on my caseload who had court dates and whatnot. And once you get into the court system, it takes forever to get anything done, right? They have to extend out court dates. And, this one of the 9 individuals was sick, so we're going to push back 3 more months. And then this sits out there, and then the judge takes however long to make whatever ruling. Like, could you imagine if in an entire nation, every single person that had a dispute with anybody else had to go to one guy? Could you imagine how long that would take to get your case heard? You would die before ever you had the opportunity to present your case. So he said, get people who can judge righteously, men who hate a bribe, and who will judge fairly, and let them handle all of these little things. And if there's a major issue, you know what this sounds like, right? Small claims court, appeals court, Supreme Court, right? If something is big enough, then bring it up to Moses and let him take it to God and handle it that way. Otherwise, just deal with it yourselves. Adults, deal with it yourselves. Did you know that not every time that you're slighted does it need to become a major, huge deal? You know, sometimes you can just, do you know that sometimes, this is a biblical thing, you can just let something go? You know that? I heard that one time in a movie. Parents, let it go, right? Sometimes you just let it go. Sometimes you can deal with it and you can take it to a small claims court. Not everything is worthy of everyone's attention. Have you ever met somebody who was wronged one time and it's all you ever hear about, ever? They talk about how difficult their life is and how everything is terrible and wrong all the time. Not everything requires the Supreme Court in your life, right? Not everybody gets access to Moses to deal with their stuff. So he's saying, find people who can do this and let them do it. And I like this part here, and particularly, judge righteously between a man and his brother or the alien who is with him. That's not talking about people from outer space. That's talking about people who don't belong to the nation of Israel. You understand? Even if it's an outsider. Or do you have any idea how different this is from the rest of the world right now as this is being written? Do you have any idea how different it is from today? Right? Even if there's somebody who is an outsider, judge fairly and impartially. Find men who can do that and won't take a bribe and let them handle this stuff. Here's the truth. Government is a necessary evil. And I said that exactly the way I meant to say that. I don't like government in general. You know what they do? Have you ever gotten a paycheck? Anyone? Just me? Cool, whatever. You ever looked at the lines on the paycheck and it's all the money that you could have if it weren't for the stupid government? You know those lines, right? I don't like when they take that money from me. You understand? Maybe you guys love it because you seem so real quiet all of a sudden. I don't like when they do that to me, right? I find it irritating, and yet I accept the fact that it is a necessary evil because I like driving my dope minivan on roads that's not made for the gravel, right? So find people who can judge. You shall not be partial in your judgment. You shall hear the small and the great alike. You shall not be intimidated by anyone, for the judgment is actually God's. Remember, this nation is a theocracy. This is the difference between us and them. God ultimately sits at the head of their government. I would argue we do not have the same thing in place. So he's saying ultimately every judgment that you cast, you should be casting as if you're doing that unto God. You should rule fairly because God rules fairly. You should rule justly because God rules justly. And the case that is too hard for you, you shall bring to me, and I will hear it, says Moses. And I commanded you at that time all the things that you should do. Let's talk about godly qualifications for judges. Righteousness, that you should judge rightly or righteously, impartially, and with patience. Why I say patience? Because specifically it said when people bring the little things to you, right? Parents, every small slight that happens to your children gets brought to you, doesn't it? Every single one of them. And there's times where at your very core, you just want to say, stop talking to me about all your problems, right? Deal with it yourself, 4-year-old, right? But that's not reasonable. And so we actually sit down and we talk through the thing. And, oh, I'm really sorry that you wanted to play, sneaky snacky squirrel, but your brother wanted to play shoots and ladders. Maybe you could play shoots and ladders and then sneaky snacky squirrel. Agreeable? Great. Good job, guys. Go be kids now, right? Every little thing always over and over and over and over again keeps coming to parents, and we have to deal with it and deal with it and deal with it. And he's saying to these judges, no matter how small the thing is, it may be big to them, and I want you to hear it fairly, righteously, and impartially. I want you to dole out justice as I would dole out justice, says God. So let's look at all of these things. These are godly qualifications for politics, be it commanders, military leaders, judges. We have wisdom, understanding, experience, righteousness, impartiality, and patience. You ever wonder why those things as opposed to any other things, right? Why those things as opposed to any other things? I have a theory. You ready for it? Here you go. What if we changed the name of the list? Attributes of God. Wisdom, understanding. There's literally no possible way that anyone else has more experience, right? He has always been. Righteousness, impartiality, and patience. Well, that seems like that's talking about who God is. It's almost as if God recognizes that the greatest form of government that we could possibly install in any nation whatsoever is the one that looks the most like him. It's almost like God would then say, the very best version of you that you could possibly be is the one that looks like me. Could you imagine the audacity of God saying that to us? Because he doesn't know how great we are, right? Right? Look at how good I am, God. I'm so great. I think everything should be made in my image. Do you really, though? I dare you to name me one person who you say, boy, if everything could be made in their image, if everything could be made in that person's image, then everything would work great. I think that about me, but certainly not about any of you. You understand? It's the joke I make all the time. If only everyone would do exactly what I tell them to, everything would work out fine. The reality is this: I don't want to live in a nation that's laws only reflect who I am, whose temperament reflects who I am, whose patience reflects who I am. That's not a good standard of living for anybody. The idea that God is giving the people is saying this: you should value the things that I value and then govern as such. That's the very best thing you can hope for out of your government, is that it will be more like me and less like you. Yeah. I think that we as a country have lost sight of this. I think that both sides are angry at the other side and probably angry at the middle, and both sides have tension every which direction. And the reason is because we've taken our eyes off of what God has called a nation to be, and we've put our eyes on what we want a nation to be, and then we vilify the other side because they are the ones standing in our way of what we want our nation to be. Never mind the fact that especially us as Christians are not called to make much of our own name. We are called to make much of the name of God, and therefore we should not want the government to just reflect what we want and the values we like. We should seek first God and pray that our government might reflect his values and what he likes. And I can prove to you that this is important to God himself. In this church, if you haven't been here, we have a thing that we try to do whenever I preach. We start with whatever the text is. We try to understand what the text would have meant to those people in those days. And then we take it across and we try to understand that through the lens of who Jesus Christ was. How would Jesus say that we are to act? And I think in John 13, we see the most beautiful understanding of this. Because in John 13, I'll set the stage. There is a typical thing that is to be done when people entered into the house in what would be the Greek culture at this point in time. We're Romans, but with Greek words that are escaping my head. What did you just say? Overtones, will take it. I like it. With Greek influence, that's what I was looking for, but overtones is good, right? The idea of this culture is that when people walk into the house with their filthy, nasty feet, whoever was the lowest person of the low, so it could be the lowest slave or servant if you were able to afford those people. If not, it was whoever was the lowest of the household, usually the youngest child. Right? I'm so grateful for so many reasons that I was born in this time and in this place, because as the youngest child, straight up, I had to empty out a gross trash can this week, almost threw up 3 times, right? And as the youngest person, if I had to get down and wipe your nasty, filthy, dirt-covered feet, I don't think I could. But anyways, legitimately they sit down, and Jesus is the one who sits down, and he takes out the basin of water and the towel, and he starts washing the disciples' feet, and he goes around and he's washing all of their feet. And this is, again, the thing that would be reserved for the lowest of the low. This is the King of glory, humbling himself and washing his disciples' feet until he gets to Peter, who is, of course, well known for his rationality and reason, right? And not at all for just being emotional and shooting off at the mouth. Gets to Peter and he says, "No, Lord, you're not going to wash my feet. This is something for the worst person in the house to do. There's no way I would let you do this." And Jesus says, "Unless I wash your feet, you can have no part of me." And then Peter, again well known for rationality, is like, "Then wash all of me," right? Sponge bath time. If that's what it takes, then I'm in. Let's go. That's weird, right? And again, Jesus is like, how about no, right? We're just going to do the feet, and then you're going to be quiet and listen to me, because I'm going to tell you why I'm doing this, and this is why I'm doing this. John 13, verse 12. When he had washed their feet and he put back on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, "Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If then I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, so you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do, just as I have done to you. Truly I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Jesus washed the feet of the disciples for what purpose? So that we would understand how we are to carry ourselves. God gives a form of government, and he highlights the attributes that he wants to be used in leading and responding to the people. And why are those the attributes? Because those are the attributes which he lovingly bestows on us. If I give them to you and what I am is the best version of good that you could understand, then the most good thing that you could do is to extend that to one another. So the nation of Israel, the stage is set. The nation of Israel has now been told, you are a people with common bonds. I'm giving you the promised land. We know how that goes, but we'll get to it. I'm giving you the promised land. Now, all you have to do is wait for it. You ready? Love the Lord your God with everything you have, right? And, let's try again. Love God. There we go, right? Literally love God, love others. That's what we've seen so far in Deuteronomy. We talked about the Shema, right? We talked about that you should love the Lord your God with every single thing you have, that you should put it on your wrist, you should put it on your forehead, you should put it on your doorpost, and put it on your gates, and put it by your wall. Do everything you can do to make sure that you are constantly reminded to love God with everything you have. And how should you occupy and run yourself as a nation? You should be kind, and you should be wise, and you should be experienced, and you should be impartial, and you should love the people who you live with. Now, spoiler alert, how do you think they're going to do? Bad. But it's important that you understand the setup. This is what's been set up, not only for the nation of Israel, but for every single person who followed after it, including you sitting here today in the middle of Kansas in 2022. Love God with everything you have. Treat others fairly and impartially because you should love them as well. As we watch this story unfold for the nation of Israel, I want you to understand that when we look at them, we think, what dummies, they messed up again. I want you to look at it humbly with this lens of understanding that we screw this stuff up all the time. And the only way to right it is to, oh guys, here's the word again, is to repent when you miss the mark. Is to say, God, I am sorry that I have failed, and I want to look more like you. I want to treat others more like you. I want to live more like you. That's the story of Israel. That's the story of us. So as we study the book of Deuteronomy, understand that we mirror them in an awful lot of ways that we wish we didn't, and hopefully we can learn to mirror God in all the ways that we hope we can. Let's pray. Father God, I am so grateful for the fact that you give us clear parameters, clear guidelines. God, an understanding of how it is that we should treat others, an understanding of how it is that we should pursue you. God, I'm so grateful for the fact that a handful of verses buried in this book that a lot of people just would skip right over, God, still reveal to us an understanding of what your character is. God, thank you for being wise and for being patient and for extending impartiality and for loving us, God. God, I pray that you help Aviator to be ignited by that spark. Seeing that in you would ignite us to be more like you, that we might be wise, that we might be patient and understanding and long-suffering, that we might love you and love our neighbors. God, help us to be drawn closer to you as we study your word. It's in your name we pray. Amen.